So guys, the UFC month of July has just wrapped up. It's come to a close. We've had 5 amazing cards this month, and I'm going to be going through the whole month of July, picking out the best moments, the best finishes, the best knockouts, the best submissions, the best performances, the best moments, and then ultimately the best event at the end of the video. So we're going to be going through the whole month of July, recapping everything, and it was a really good month for the UFC. 5 cards, 2 pay-per-views, a London fight night, and 2 pretty entertaining Apex cards as well. So I'm gonna just start off by running some numbers, going through a few of the stats for this month, on the fights themselves, and then also my picks for this month in July. So during the month of July, we had 64 fights. 29 of them went to decision, 20 of them were finished by TKO or KO, and 15 of them were finished by submission. As far as my picks went. For the UFC Fight Night card, Strickland vs Magomedov, I got 6 out of 12. For UFC 290, I got 8 out of 13. For UFC Fight Night Holm vs Bueno Silva, I got 11 out of 13. For UFC Fight Night Aspinall versus Tybura, I got 9 out of 15. And then for UFC 291, Poirier versus Gaethje, I wrapped up strongly and I got 10 out of 11 for that card, finishing with a total of 44 out of 64, sitting at 69% on predictions for the month of July. Very happy about that, bumping that up quite a bit from the 56% that I had for the UFC month of June when I first did this video. I was 4 out of 5 on main events. The only one I got wrong was Bueno Silva. I picked Holly Holm in that matchup to win by decision. And then I was 18 out of 24 on pay-per-view cards, so very solid there as well. So those are just some numbers to go through there. Great month again, 29, so 49 out of 64. No, sorry, 35 out of 64 fights ending by finish is always a good thing to see. No contests or draws this time, unlike in June. But yeah, those are just some numbers to run through. So did pretty well on my picks. I'm pretty happy with that. But we're going to start off with the first category, and it's the performance of the month. There were some amazing, very impressive performances in the month of July. As far as the category goes and the sort of criteria, I'm kind of looking at just overall how impressive the performance was, given maybe their opponent or given what people thought going into it. Let's say if they were an underdog and they came out and looked really impressive and surprised a lot of people, or if they were just extremely dominant the whole way through, just a flawless performance, or if they just got a really impressive finishing sequence and just wrapped a fight up quickly, but not in a way that would probably that would probably qualify for the best KO of the month. So more of a finish that wasn't like a clean KO, but just a really masterful finish. So those are what I'm kind of looking for here. But let's run through the nominees and then I'll reveal my winner at the end. So the first nominee is Volk continues to rule the roof at 145, and it's Alexander Volkanovski against Yair Rodriguez. Fought at the main event of UFC 290. Finished him in the third round by TKO. It was an all-round dominant performance. Volkanovski lost about 1 minute of that whole fight, and finished him dominantly in the third round. The second nomination, South African stunner, Dricus du Plessis TKO's Robert Whitaker in the second. Extremely impressive, big underdog here. Not many people expected him to win, but he did so, and he did so extremely impressively and without suffering a lot of damage either. The next one is, here's the fucking thing, guys. It's Sean Strickland against Abbas Magomedov. An impressive performance, a second round's TKO. Came back from adversity in the first round and just put a beating on him in the second and got a finish. The next one is Still Got It, and it's Dan Hooker against Jalen Turner. He did extremely well in that fight, won a decision. Was not expected to win. Everyone said he was washed, and he showed up and he showed that he's still got it. And Dan Hooker got the 29-28 decision win. And the last one is the Scotsman arriving at middleweight, Paul Craig against Andre Muniz. Came down, coming off a few rough losses. Fought Andre Muniz, who everyone said was one of the best grapplers in the middleweight division. I even picked Andre Muniz to win that fight. But he came in and looked pretty good on the feet and then TKO'd him on the ground, survived the exchanges, had him in a few submission attempts, and all rounds looked very impressive. But my winner for the performance of the month, it's got to go to Alexander Volkanovski against Yair Rodriguez. It was an unbelievable performance, otherworldly, people could say. Yair Rodriguez coming off an absolute world-beating performance against Josh Emmett at UFC 284. Alexander Volkanovski just came in there, handled him easily, made him look like he was some run-of-the-mill featherweight, and got him out of there in the third round easier than any of his other fights in the past, even quicker than he got Korean Zombie out of there. didn't finish Max Holloway, and not a lot of guys have been finishing Yair Rodriguez. So very impressive from Alexander Volkanovski. That's the winner. Um, I'm looking at Dricus du Plessis as probably the runner-up, and then maybe Dan Hooker against Jalen Turner. Both performances on the same card. All three of these on the same card. Um, where they were underdogs, except for Volk. Obviously, Dan Hooker and Dricus du Plessis were both underdogs. Not many people expected them to win. In the case of Dan Hooker, everyone thought he was washed, and everyone thought Jalen Turner was the prospect on the rise. And in the case of Dricus du Plessis, everyone just thought Robert Whittaker was too good, and Dricus just hadn't reached that level yet, and that he was going to get outclassed for 3 rounds, which I did pick as well as many people did. But he showed up impressively and got the finish. So yeah, but the winner, it's got to be Volkanovski. Fought the interim champion, the guy that everyone said was his most dangerous fight to date, and he just handled him easily. It was quite impressive to see. But yeah, congrats to Alexander Volkanovski on the performance of the month. But moving on to the submission of the month. As we said before, there were 15 submissions in the month of July, so I've narrowed it down to 5. I'll give you your nominations, and then you can decide for yourself which one you think was the best. But I'll reveal my personal winner at the end. We've got Mario Bruno Silva submitting Holly Holm with the sort of ninja choke slash guillotine at the UFC Fight Night. Holm vs Bruno Silva in the main event. The next one is Rafael Filo submits Perez with the arm triangle in London. Opened up the card, suffered some adversity, was pretty much out of there, but came back and got an arm triangle in the first round. But wild back and forth fight as long as it lasted until the finish. The next one is Renak Fakredinov putting Kevin Lee to sleep with the guillotine. Kevin Lee made his return. Renat for Kredinov, he got fed to him. Renat was the big favourite, so that does sort of reduce a few of the points on it. And another thing that reduces a few of the points on this finish was the fact that he dropped him badly before he ended up getting the guillotine. So I'm gonna take away a few points from that because more of a finish rather than just a pure submission. The next one is Holland wraps up the dust against Michael Chiesa. Obviously, this last Sunday, Holland submitted Michael Chiesa in the first round. Very impressive performance, and especially against Michael Chiesa, being a grappler and a jiu-jitsu guy who everyone thought was going to finish Holland on the ground or dominate him on the ground. To finish him quite easily and get the Darce choke in the first round, very impressive from him. And the final nomination is Bonfim versus Giles. Gabriel Bonfim came in at UFC 291 coming off a 49-second submission in his debut with a guillotine, and he proved it wasn't a fluke. He got it done again in a minute and 13, so very impressive from him. Um, but my winner for this category is going to be Kevin Holland against Michael Chiesa. There were some very impressive finishes. I was leaning towards Bruno Silva against Holm, but just the fact that Holm, 41 years old, never looked kind of old, just looked kind of shit in that matchup. That being said, Chiesa did as well, but just the fact that Chiesa is known to be a grappler with great jiu-jitsu. And the other ones like Filo against Perez, impressive. That was another close kind of one. Bonfim against Giles Guillotine was a big favourite, but yeah, it was between Bruno Silva and Holland. I ultimately picked Holland. I think it was more clean to watch. Holm kind of just fell into it and just kind of walked forward into this sort of into the sort of guillotine choke. And Bruno Silva was also a jiu-jitsu artist, so she was expected to, if she was going to finish that fight, to do so by submission. But very impressive from all of those fighters that got the submissions there. In terms of what was the coolest to watch, I've got to say Renat against Kevin Lee, but the fact that he dropped him first, and that he was a big favorite, just takes away from it a little bit. But moving on to the best moment of the month. This one's kind of a bit not well set out. It's very personal. Like whoever you, it's decisive. Like you guys can kind of decide whichever moment you guys preferred for yourself. It's not really a set category of sorts. It's sort of just the moments that hit the hardest, that were the most special to watch. Not necessarily the best finishes or the best knockouts, the best submissions, anything like that. The best fights of the month, but just the moments that kind of hit you and were like, yeah, I'll think about that. That's a moment. Like that's something I'll remember, not just for the violent finish that it delivered of sorts. But I'll go through the nominations. Firstly, we've got Ruthless Robbie Lawler retiring. He TKO'd or KO'd Nico Price in under a minute. And got sent off in probably the best retirement I think we've ever seen in the UFC. The next one is Are You Proud of Me Now, Dad? It was Pantoja winning the belt in a back and forth slugfest against Brandon Moreno. He fought his heart out and he got the finish. That was very impressive to see from him. A really hard hitting moment. The crowd was booing him. I'm not sure why. I picked him to win. I was more than happy. I was very happy to see him win. And just that post fight speech. English isn't even in his first language. He was speaking broken English, but you could just feel the emotion that he was sending out, and you could really get around him and understand what that moment meant to him. So that was very nice to see. The next one was a face-off to remember. It was Izzy facing off with Dricus du Plessis after Dricus's win against Robert Whitaker. Probably the most heated, one of the most heated face-offs, I'd say, at least in the cage. Brock Lesnar versus DC wasn't really heated. It was kind of scripted of sorts. Brock Lesnar came in and just pushed him. But this one was a one with genuine hatred behind it and something that was very kind of awkward, I guess, to see, but also something that was a bit controversial and just kind of a bit dry, not dry, a bit just weird, uncomfortable to watch. Just the way Izzy was behaving, it was like you didn't know how to feel. It was like you was like Dricus has just done a really good thing here. This is a fight I want to see, Izzy versus Dricus, but Izzy came in and it was just so heated. The racial kind of tensions in this, which Izzy sort of brought into it. Um, but it's definitely a face-off that we're going to remember. The next one is Tommy Boy returns in 73 seconds. The big Englishman came back after a terrible knee injury against Curtis Blades, and he returned in the same place that it happened a year ago. But he got it done in 73 seconds with an impressive KO over Marcin Tybura. Was just too quick and just got him out of there quickly, got him out of there fast and early, and had a great moment on the mic. Give me that microphone, Mike Bisping. Um, I'll go to Paris. I'll be in front row for Cyril Gane versus Sergey Spivak. I'll fight the winner, and then I'll beat John Jones. That's what he kind of said. That's not what he sounds like. I can't really do a Aspinall accent, but that's the sort of gist of it. He had a great moment. It was all round. Brought the London crowd alight. It was sort of a stale card before that, but he capped it off with a good note, and it was good to see. Um, and then the last moment of the month is just Derek Lewis being Derek Lewis. Last weekend he fought against Marcos Rogerio de Lima. If you haven't seen it, you should. And if you haven't seen it, you're not a true UFC fan. He came in there, went flying knee immediately, went full Masvidal mode, and dropped Marcos within like the first 5 seconds of the fight. Hammered away with ground and pound, got the finish, took his shorts off, danced around the octagon, and then had another one of the best post-fight speeches that I've ever seen. It was just 5 minutes of just pure entertainment and something that we're all going to remember for a very long time. But good to see Derek getting back in the win column. It was really nice to see from him. Impressive finish, and it livened up the crowd after Tony Ferguson had a disappointing and sad performance against Bobby Green. But the really good performance. But ultimately, it's not going to be the winner. The winner is got to be ruthless Robbie Lawler retiring in 38 seconds against Nico Price. We just don't see retirements like this often. It was just the perfect kind of storm. He came in, got it done, landed some big shots early, got Nico Price out of there, put him out cold. The crowd was alight, and then they showed him that whole highlight package of his career, and it was just great to watch. It was very emotional, even as someone who I saw Robbie Lawler fight Brian Barberena, and I saw the replay of the Nick Diaz fight after it happened. But I'm not a guy that saw the Robbie Lawler fights in his prime when he was ruthless, when he was that guy running 170, and just putting on fight of the year candidates after fight of the year candidate. So even as someone who's not even overly connected to Robbie Lawler or Robbie Lawler's career, I understood what was behind this, and I felt the emotion that everyone in that arena felt, and everyone watching on their TVs felt when they saw Robbie Lawler retire like that and get the proper send off that all of the legends of the sport deserve. But yeah, great moments all around. There were some really nice ones, really hard hitting ones, and then a few other ones like Dricus and Izzy, which was just a bit different, a very different tone to the emotions. It was a very different emotion to what we felt against with Robbie Lawler. But still, great moments. And Robbie Lawler retiring has got to be one of the best moments I think we've had, if not definitely this month, if not this year, one of the best of all time, in my opinion. So that was great to see. But we're going to move on to the best KO of the month category. Um, as I said before, I believe there were 20 something. I think it was 20 TKO or KOs in the month of July. And I've narrowed it down to five again. There were some really impressive ones. I'm going off kind of just the brutality of the KO, who it was against, just how impressive it was, how much it kind of got you out of your seat and was like, what the fuck? That's crazy. Um, so yeah, all around, just those are the sort of categories. Um, the first nomination, Gaethje head kicks Poirier into the Shadow Realm. Obviously the main event of UFC 291 last weekend. One of the most iconic head kick KOs along there with Leon Edwards against Kamaru Usman in the same venue, mind you, just made it so much more crazy. And just again, who it was against, Dustin Poirier, one of the best lightweights of all time, one of the best lightweights in the world currently. Um, and someone who is rarely a guy that gets knocked out. The last time he got knocked out before this was against Michael Johnson, and that was just the kind of shot that just caught him quick. But he got put out bad by Justin Gaethje and then flipped off the cage um, and had a great moment, got the BMF title, but an all-round amazing KO. Dricus stopping Bobby Knuckles in the second. There was the right hand and then the body shots, the swarm of punches that just got Whitaker out of there. Crazy to see. He was like a 4-1 underdog, but came in there and got it done against all odds, and then he's now fighting for a title in his next fight. Really impressive to see. And the next one, also on that UFC 290 card, was Aguilar putting Shannon Ross out cold in 17 seconds with an overhand right. Not a high profile fight, not a one that a lot of people are going to remember. But this is why you guys got to watch the prelims. You got to watch the early prelims, and you got to watch the whole cards just like me, because that was one of the craziest KOs in terms of just the pure KO, ignoring who was fighting. Like no one's going to remember 20 years time who Jesus Aguilar or Shannon Ross is. Those aren't names that you're going to tell your kids about. But just the fact, just how clean that KO was, I've got to give it a mention. Um, and 17 seconds as well. Just put him out bad, flattened him. Um, yeah, overhand right, 17-second KO, timed it perfectly, and just got. I believe he got a bonus, and if he didn't, then he definitely should have. But anyway, the next one, obviously, Lewis flying knees De Lima out cold, or not out cold, but he flying knees De Lima and then swarms him with ground and pound. The whole moment we talked about it before in the moment of the month, but it's also got to kind of get an inclusion for the KO of the month. Not really a clean KO, but a TKO and a very impressive and quick one at that. 33 seconds that was the official time on the clock. Timex, the official timekeeper of the UFC. With my little John Anik ad read right there. But yeah, Timex taking a look and keep on ticking since fucking 1893 or whatever the fuck it is. Um, but yeah, really impressive, flying knee, and it was just so fun to see. So impressive stuff from Derek Lewis. The next one, Roman Kopylov freezes Claudio Ribeiro with a head kick, also on that UFC 291 card. The first high kick of the night, but it's the less memorable one of the two between him and Justin Gaethje, just because of the placement on the card. Again, on the prelims, watch the prelims, guys. You better not be getting up just for the main card because otherwise you're a casual. But yeah, really impressive. Claudio Ribeiro came on strong at the end of the first round. But then start of the second, like 25 seconds in, Roman Kopylov just landed a massive head kick and just freezed him or froze him like Elsa. And he was just out cold on the canvas. And then big follow up shot wasn't required, but he landed it anyway. But a really impressive head kick KO from Roman Kopylov, who's now on a bit of a streak in that middleweight division. Um, but undoubtedly, the KO of the month, it's got to go to Justin Gaethje. The most impactful, the biggest, the baddest, the best, the craziest KO, the most high profile one as well. It's just got to go to Justin Gaethje. Everything about it, perfect storm. Lost to him in the first fight, coming into the rematch, the BMF title fight, main eventing a pay per view. Years later, these guys are both stars. Dustin Poirier has fought for belts. He's fought Conor McGregor. He's fought Michael Chandler. He's got both guys had a scarily, eerily similar career trajectory after they both fought each other. But again, when they meet up, it went to Justin Gaethje and it went to him by knockout. Landed a massive shot, head kick, set it up perfectly, and just how similar it was to Kamaru Usman getting KO'd by Leon Edwards, who's also Kamaru Usman is Justin Gaethje's teammate. Something about that was just like, this is too crazy. This is a deja vu moment for Justin Gaethje, but really impressive. Again, all of these deserve a mention. Dricus beating the number one middleweight contender, Aguilar, KO, Kopylov, head kick, Lewis flying knee, everything extremely impressive, but got to go to Justin Gaethje. But guys, moving on, we'll go to the fight of the month. There were some barn burners in the month of July, some impressive back and forth scraps that we love to watch, and we're going to go back and watch again. And these were the five that if you told me, you give me 5 fights from July that I'm going to go back and watch and just have a great time, I've got to give you these 5 nominations. So first one, bloody scrap ends in the third. It's Guram Gutadaladze against Elves Brenner. On the first card of July, UFC Fight Night, Strickland versus Magomedov. Guram Kutateladze came in on short notice as a big favourite against Els Brenner, who was scheduled to fight Jordan Levitt, who is only known for twerking around the octagon when he wins and being a zesty ass motherfucker. So Brenner came in, was looking to beat Jordan Levitt. He pulled out and he pulls the short straw and he gets Guram Kutateladze, who had a fight fall out against Jamie Malarkey a few weeks prior. But Brenner rocks up and does what he does. The shootbox style gets dropped badly. He had cuts all over him. His hair was dyed red by the end of it. The white hair went red by the end of the fight. But he came on. He just fought well. And it was one of the most entertaining unranked fights that I've seen in quite a while. Um, they just put on a scrap. It was just a scrap, and Brenner came back with the comeback win. Was 2 rounds down, but then just put the pace on Guram in the third round and TKO'd him with a shot to the neck, and then followed up with ground and pound and got the show done. Um, the next option or the next nomination, a fight for the ages for the flyweight strap. It was Moreno against Pantoja. The trilogy or the rematch, whichever one you want to go with. But regardless, it was one of the fights of the year, one of the best flyweight fights of all time, alongside Figgy and Moreno won. And just an undoubtedly special fight. It was just twists and turns at every corner. Moreno looked like he was in deep trouble in the first round, got dropped, and you're like, this is happening again. He's going to lose to this guy again. But then Pantoja starts to gas. Moreno comes back in the second. In the third and fourth, they're close rounds. You're like, maybe Pantoja's kind of squeaking these out, but they're really close. And in the fifth round, it was all rounders back and forth the whole time. I'm summing this up too quickly to give it justice, but you guys have seen the fight, I'm sure. Back and forth to the highest level, just flyweights at the top of the division is always going to be entertaining to watch, but these guys put it on. The heart and will shown from both guys was just what made this fight what it was. And Pantoja, with just desperation, got the back, got the dominant positions, and did enough to win the fight. Amazing fight. The next one was just a scratch or two. It was Dan Hooker against Jalen Turner. Um, Amazing fight. It was the fight of the night before the co-main event with Moreno and Pantoja. Dan Hooker came in as a big underdog. Everyone thought he was washed. Everyone thought Jalen Turner was going to fuck him up, and like send him out of the rankings. And Dan Hooker was going to take a bunch of damage, and he was going to never be anything in the sport again. But he came in, took a tough first round, came in the second, absorbed the biggest fucking head kick that you'll see a man take, other than probably Yoel Romero. Just took a flush foot to the face and just stood up and just ate it. Didn't even get dropped. But then came on in the second, late in the second, put him down, swarmed him with punches, got the back and had an in rear naked choke right at the end of the round. Third round, back and forth again. Dan Hooker did enough. It was the thing that made this so entertaining was just seeing Dan Hooker go back to vintage Hangman and just put it on a guy, um, just swarm him with shots. It was just very entertaining to watch. And then after the fight, Joe Rogan said, "Did you break your arm?" He's like, "Oh, it's just a scratch." So yeah, and then he also fractured his orbital as well. So Dan Hooker, absolute warrior, made this fight one of the fights of the year. The next one, Della gets tested. It was Jack Della Maddalena against Hafez, Brazil Hafez. This was a really fun scrap in the Apex. Um, it was a fight which Jeff Del Maddalena took on short notice. He wanted to fight his fight at UFC 290 fell out against two. It was against Sean Brady, and then the guy who he fought. He was going to fight someone else who fell out as well. And then he ended up. He said he wanted to fight, so they got him on the next card against Hafez, this guy that not many people know. And it was just a scrap. Like he got real tested. Um, he took him to a decision. It was really close by the end. Ended up being a split. Um, ended up being a split, and Hafez just pushed him. A lot of people thought he won, to be honest. I'm just going to check the stats really briefly. He got takedowns. Jack Della Maddalena was just doing some extremely questionable decision making. Basil Hafez, yeah. If I'm looking at the stats here, 149 total strikes for Jack Della Maddalena. So he pieced him up on the feet, but Hafez had control time. He had grappling. He had submission attempts. Jack Della Maddalena kept jumping gillies, which was almost just frustrating to watch. But he ended up pulling it out and looking to turn around in Sydney. So it was always good to see a prospect there tested, and it's another one of those short notice fights or short notice fighters that comes in and just proves everyone wrong and just fights beyond their expectation. But the next fight and the last domination is Rock'em Sock'em Robots in London. It was Danny Roberts against Johnny Parsons. This was just a really fun scrap on the prelims. It was nothing crazy, nothing you haven't seen before, but just a ridiculously fun fight to watch. It was just dumb in all areas, like they were just swinging. Danny Roberts was just walking forward after getting rocked badly. But ended up getting put away in the second, which kind of took away from it because you want to see the fights go a little bit longer when they are so entertaining. But yeah, I've got to give the winner to Moreno versus Pantoja, undoubtedly. He won the fight of the night at UFC 290, and its only competition, I believe, on this list. It was JDM. Sorry, it was Dan Hooker versus Jalen Turner. Um, so undoubtedly wins the fight of the month, and undoubtedly is a real contender for fight of the year so far. But really entertaining stuff to watch. But our final category, guys, we've got the event of the month. We've had 5 events in July. All of them have been great. All of them have had their moments. Um, so let's just run through all of them, and I'll give my final pick at the end. So we'll start from the start of July. UFC Fight Night Strickland versus Magomedov had 6 finishes out of 12 fights. The highlights: we had Strickland getting the TKO. We had Bruno Saint Denis get a submission. Sultan Rizabov KO'd Bruno Ferreira. Renat Frekretinov put Kevin Lee out cold with the guillotine. Joannison Brito got a KO. Brenner versus Guram was a scrap that you're going to go back and rewatch. It was just entertaining all rounds. It was a fun card in the Apex. It was actually surprisingly stacked for name value as an Apex fight night goes, and it was just a really fun watch. So yeah, next one, UFC 290, Volkanovski versus Rodriguez, 9 finishes. Jesus Aguilar getting the KO. Cameron Simon proved to be the real deal. Vitor Petrino got the submission late. Alonzo Menefield subbed Jimmy Crute in the rematch. Denise Gomez put away Yasmin Uragui in 20 seconds. Robbie Lawler retired in a ruthless fashion. Um, Bo Nickel got Val Woodburn out of there in 38 seconds with the strikes. Pantoja versus Moreno, Hooker versus Turner, Volkanovski's termination of Yair Rodriguez, and then Dricus du Plessis' impressive win over Robert Whitaker. UFC 290 was an undoubtedly special card and something that you're going to go back and rewatch and remember as one of the best cards of all time, in my opinion. The next fight, the next card, UFC Fight Night, Holm versus Bruno Silva, sort of a filler, sort of a cool down, but still a fun card. It had 5 finishes. It had Bruno Silva getting the sub. Della versus Hafez was a scrap. Francisco Pardo got the spinning elbow KO over Ottoman Azaitar. Yun Young Park submitted Albert Jurayev very impressively. And then there was one other one. There was Um, another submission on that card, which I just got to recheck here. But a really fun card. I got to look. I got to look. Victoria Dudikova TKO to Stella Nunes, but it was an arm break. Evan Elder against Genaro Valdez was a scrap and a half. Mezelquez Costa looked great on the feet. And the submission finish went to Nazim Sadikov against Terence McKinney. A fun fight there. Came back from adversity and won in the second round. A solid card. UFC Fight Night Aspinall versus Tybura. The UFC returned to London with a fight night for the first time in a year. It had 6 finishes. The highlights: Aspinall getting the KO in 73 seconds. Julia Stoliarenko stops the hype of Molly McCann if there was any. Um, Paul Craig got the TKO over Andre Muniz. We had Parsons versus Roberts was a fun scrap. Joel Alvarez subbed Mark Jacasey with a bit of controversy there with a headbutt. And then Jafar Filo got the sub as well in a fun scrap. Really good stuff. Also, Andre Fili versus Nathaniel Wood was a really fun fight back and forth. So a solid card in London, but a little bit underwhelming as far as it went. They definitely could have got a few better names on this card, in my opinion, and a few better fights, which could have made it way better. But you just know when Molly McCann's the co-main event, it's a little bit underwhelming. I got to be honest, but a fun card and it wrapped up well. But the final card of the month, UFC 291, Poirier Gaethje 2. There was 9 finishes again, tying UFC 290. The highlights was Gaethje's KO to win the BMF title. Derek Lewis flying and hit Marco Sergio de Lima and then just threw lunchboxes at him. Bobby Green subbed Tony Ferguson. Sad. Kevin Holland subbed Michael Chiesa very impressively. Gabriel Bonfim got a quick gilly. Roman Kopylov KO'd Claudio Ribeiro out cold. Jake Matthews submitted Darius Flowers in a bit of a weird fight. Something that's a bit questionable. What was going on in that fight as well. Darius Flowers, bit of a weird guy, a bit of an acting performance going on from him there. Uros Medic came back in the third round and got the spinning back fist TKO. And then Miranda Maverick started off the card with a submission over Priscilla Cachoeira. But the event of the month, two great ones there with UFC 290 and UFC 291. It's always going to be the pay-per-views. If the pay-per-views even somewhat deliver, they're going to just overtake the fight nights. That's just how it is. But the event of the month, undoubtedly, it has to go to UFC 290. UFC 291, undoubtedly a great event, but it just had a few dampening moments. It just had a few moments of sadness with Tony Ferguson and like a few like Vergara against Salvador was just a bit mid. Um, but yeah, all around, very solid card. But UFC 290, 9 finishes. There were just so many highlights. There was, I believe, it was 4 under a minute. Yeah, 4 KOs slash TKOs in under a minute. We had Jesus Aguilar in 17 seconds, Denise Gomez in 20, and then both Bo Nickel and Robbie Lawler both got their work done in 38 seconds. That's something you've never seen, and I'm pretty sure that was a modern UFC record. Um, so undoubtedly special card. The two fight of the year candidates in Moreno versus Pantoja and then Hooker versus Dan Turner. Um, sorry, Jalen Turner versus Dan Hooker, I should say. Um, Great card, and then Volkanovski wrapped it up with just one of the best performances you'll ever see, in my opinion. But an amazing card and an amazing month of July that it was, guys. Let me know if you guys agree with my picks down below in the comments. I'll just wrap up again here. I've had the fight of the month I put as Moreno versus Pantoja. The moment of the month was ruthless Robbie Lawler retiring. The best submission of the month I said was Kevin Holland against Michael Chiesa. The best performance of the month was Volkanovski against Yair Rodriguez. The best fight of the month, I just said that. The best KO of the month was Justin Gaethje against Dustin Poirier. And then the best event of the month was undoubtedly UFC 290. And I'll wrap up with the numbers one final time before I let you guys go. July recap, 64 fights, 29 decisions, 20 KOs, 15 submissions, and I went a grand total of 44 out of 64 on the predictions. That's the video, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like down below. Leave a comment on what your thoughts were on the card. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one, which should be the podcast. I'm gonna try and get that out tomorrow, and then the Sandhagen vs Font prediction video will be out sometime this week. But peace.